Boro Park, Brooklyn, New York, circa the late 70s where I grew up, was a mix of multiculturalism, if you count Irish, Italian, and Jewish as diversity. When my dark, Sephardic-looking Israeli mom went apartment shopping with her very blonde and blue-eyed, soon-to-be mother-in-law, she was asked to wait outside, repeatedly. The cleaner was not welcome for a tour. About a year later, as she strolled me down 13th Avenue, my blue eyes just like my daddy's, she was asked if she was the nanny or the cleaner. By this point, she understood that cleaner didn't mean the same thing as cleaning lady. She did not look Eastern European. Hearing my mom tell me these stories as a teenager myself and seeing her face flush with renewed shame and embarrassment of being othered and dismissed because of her appearance made me empathize for that 18, 19, 20-year-old immigrant kid. Knowing that my grandparents were survivors of a nearly successful, systematic genocide because of their race made me understand that I had to have my finger on the pulse of progress by asking myself and others, when did you first notice you were different from other people? Or did you notice other people were different first? And that is what we are going to tackle today. By 1983, Boro Park was 85% Orthodox Jewish. My parents were not Orthodox, and they found an affordable starter home 10 blocks away on a tree-lined street in another world. East 5th Street between Ditmas Avenue and Avenue F was a snapshot of the landscape of the newly developing Kensington part of Brooklyn. I was one of many children who had parents with mother tongues. Pakistani, Russian, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Egyptian, Dominican. In fact, I don't think I met a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant until college. It's a true story. Remember that movie, The Goonies? That was who we identified as literally. We didn't know we were different. Some went to private school. And we only cared, could you come out to play? And could you contribute to the block kids' goal? The goal, to create secret passageways to navigate through the backyards of every home on the block without getting caught from one avenue to the next. We played kick the can, stickball, capture the flag, and our parents stood outside and chatted over leaf raking, snow shoveling, and really partied together at our annual block party. And then came Howard Beach and Tawana Brawley, Yusuf Hawkins, and the Crown Heights riots. And while we kids didn't understand what was happening to our Brooklyn world, we did notice that the grown-ups no longer congregated together on the street, and we never had another block party again. And as long as we played outside, we were okay to play together. But we never entered each other's homes or apartments anymore. And somehow we knew to never ask our parents about it. My guest today is the CEO of 90 Forward, an organization that provides a brave space and a safe space to have the talks and ask the questions about race that we have been holding on to, in some cases for generations. Welcome, Dr. Kimberly Allen.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on to Schmooze with Suze. So here's the deal. I went to do a little deep dive on you, and I read your most recent annual report for 90 Forward, and it began by you saying, to paraphrase, "We don't need another damn study or report about racism. It's here, it's serious, let's work on ending it." Is that...
I like the way you paraphrase that.
So that's a bold statement, and I love it. Tell me more about why you decided to cut through the BS and lay out the facts.
Truth of the matter is, you said it. We know it's here. And so we have done a lot of things to sort of patchwork solutions that have worked in small quantities, but we need larger scale change that's going to be long term. And so we've studied ourselves to death. We've studied ourselves into a coma, I think, because I think it really has paralyzed us from taking action.
Right? The word convene makes my stomach hurt. Every time I hear, let's convene, I think, can we take that vision board and turn it into an action plan? And that seems to be the way. So since we are bold and no BS women, I will start by saying that my experience with race was unique to my upbringing, and my community didn't choose if we would discuss people hating us. Everyone I grew up with, my parents, my sisters, cousins, are named for someone who was murdered in the final solution at Auschwitz, which is typical of my generation. My grandparents had numbers tattooed on their arms. Our Jewish schools openly displayed the photographic evidence of everything that led up to and including the Holocaust. The Bible stories we read, the holidays we learned about, were all a series of they tried to kill us. Thank God we survived. Let's eat. Where did you grow up, and what did it feel like growing up in your world? Did you discuss race, and how?
So I grew up here in Jacksonville.
A native.
Yeah, a native.
I love it.
My grandparents lived here. My parents are from here. My husband's family's from here. So like we're a really nice a native family.
You're braided into the landscape.
That's right.
Which gives you an excellent perspective.
One that I love to talk with other natives because I think we have a unique sort of view of the city and sort of where it's been, where it's going, and all those things. So it's really neat. And in my family, my parents, my grandparents actually lived on the east side of Jacksonville. So it's affectionately known as out east. And that for me was haven. That was safety. I know a lot of folks sort of hear about the east side sometimes, or have heard in the past about the east side, and folks are fearful or afraid, but that's in my life where I felt the safest, on the east side, because it was family out there. And so I watched my grandparents feed neighbors. I watched kids show up and eat, at my granny's table. We walked to the corner store together where we knew the owners of the store, and they would, give us things. And it was really community there, and we absolutely discussed race. In my household, my parents and I, my siblings, we grew up on the north side. So my parents purchased a house on the north side of Jacksonville, which now folks are sort of lumped into Northwest Jacksonville, and that also has a reputation. But the section or the part or the block or the community that I grew up in was also very welcoming and warm. Mostly black for my entire life, but we absolutely discussed race because the thought being outside of this space, this is a safe space here, but outside of here, it is not always safe for us. And I tell the story often that my dad told me, don't come back here. He's like, when I went off to college and I was there, and often he was like, don't come back. This is not a place for young, educated black people.
Really? And what time frame is this?
This is the 2000s.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So in Brooklyn, I remember when I first got my learner's permit and I got my driver's license, my father sat down with a map. In the olden days, that's what we had, was a paper map, and you would unfold it. And I remember my dad circling the parts of Brooklyn that he did not want me driving into. And he said, this is not safe. Meanwhile, if I tell you that I grew up and it was so multicultural that the idea, I'm trying to imagine what you're describing is similar to me being at home. And my table was, but that was only in my home. Once we left and went to the block, I didn't talk about Jewish outside because that wasn't something that we shared, right? That was inside. So in your world, there was no outside, inside. Your community was so insular?
It was very insular, but there was a very clear distinction between when you leave this part of town, when you leave this neighborhood, when you go out into the world, there are things that you need to know. So I have two older brothers, and one of my brothers is an adventurous soul, is what I would call him. And he had his first car was this a really old Cadillac. And he painted it like candy apple green.
Ooh.
And he had dark tint and he had rims, the whole nine. And my dad said to him, you're going to get pulled over with that car. And sure enough, my brother got pulled over once, got stopped, told that his tint was too dark. He got pulled over again. Your music is too loud. And then the third time he got pulled over, the officer said, every time I see your car, I am going to pull you over.
Wow.
And so so those kinds of conversations in my household, my dad was very clear. Like, you need to. He said it up front. He said it in front of everybody. You need to change. This car. This car is going to put a bullseye on you outside of here.
But those are the kinds of words he used?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So my grandparents would say they're coming for us. Mm-hmm. They were not even a little bit, there was no secret trying to make us better. They said, keep cash on hand, keep your passport ready, because they're coming for us. They come every generation, be ready. So you're...
Yeah.
Experience. Is this your oldest sibling that we're talking about?
No, this is my, so my oldest brother and I are 13 years apart, and then my other brother and I are 8 years apart. So we're talking about the one who's 8 years older than me. An adventurous soul.
Yeah, so I was the adventurous soul in my family. We called it a gypsy, right? Okay. Because I'm of Romanian heritage. And so, and I wear the bangles and the long skirts. And at the time in my life, that was it. I would travel the world, because for me, it's curious that you said don't go, your dad said don't go, come back here. I remember when I was in college, I wanted to go back on this experience called March of the Living, where they go back to the concentration camps, and you visit those concentration camps, and then you go back to Israel, where there's almost like this rebirth, right? You get to see the trajectory. And my grandfather begged me, why would you go back there? We barely made it out of there. And I thought to myself, for two reasons. One, so that I can F you Hitler, right? That we made it out, and here we are, not one generation, but 2 generations later. And the second one was that I felt like if I didn't see it with my own eyes, what if I have kids one day and my grandparents with their numbers that I grew up with aren't around? Who's going to be here to say this really did happen? So tell me, here in Jacksonville, you've been here your whole life. You've watched the trajectory. Your family, 2-3 generations now. They've watched the trajectory. You're here. You didn't leave town, right?
No, I went away for about 10 years just to go to college, and stayed too long, and moved back because I wanted to make a difference here. There's something about making a difference at home. Mm-hmm. I thought at one point I was going to be a professor at some university in the middle of who knows where. And I was like, that is not the life I want. I really wanted to be, on the ground level and making impact that way. And so I came back home to do that. I was like, what better place to do that than home?
So here's what's so interesting to me, right? And I tell this to people. Back in the olden days when I was in real estate, I remember seeing Jacksonville pop up on this website called loopnet.com. It was a real estate for multifamily properties. And probably at the time, I didn't know anything about Jacksonville, but they probably were in those neighborhoods and areas that you're talking about. And nobody ever thought about it. We just knew that Jacksonville was really far away. And now that I'm here, to me, it's the perfect small city, like a microcosm of effective change. And I've said to people, this is the first place I ever saw a Confederate flag. This is the first place I ever saw a live modern-day swastika. And I've been to places, like I said, with concentration camps. This is the first place that I've heard outright racist remarks being stated. It's also the first place that I've seen people like you who come back and say, you're not chasing me out of my city. I'm going to effect change, and we are going to lift each other up. Did you find that when you got here, you had a support system at home that was like, yes, Dr. Allen, thank you for coming back? Or were they like, really? You didn't run off and do things in big cities elsewhere?
No, actually, it was very supportive. 'Cause, my family is huge, so my family is a big part of my life. My mom is one of 12. My dad is one of 10. So
wow.
My family was happy.
I want to be invited.
You should see the family reunions.
I was just fishing for an invitation to one. And I will reciprocate. Right? Because that's what we're looking for, inclusivity.
It's a great time. And
big family, and they're all here in town as far north and south as...
they didn't spread out too much, but as far north as D.C., we have some folks out in Texas, and then in South Miami. So we a few of us sort of spread out, but
Yeah.
for the most part, they're here. And it's all love when we come together. So it's always supportive, right? Even my dad, he's like, well, we'll just find places to travel. He wants to. He's ex-military. He retired from the military, and so like now that he's retired from his second career, he's like looking just to travel. So we make it work. But,
Love it.
It was. I found a group of people who, some native, some not, who really care about the city, and we're excited to have added another person who also cares and wants to see change happen. And so it was love. It was all love.
Yeah. So, right, we worked. I read the history of 904. It actually started as a bunch of friends that got together, and they said we have to have these conversations. Like I said, we both come from backstories where our insulated communities have been affected by racial experiences that are specific to us. And so we have these conversations in private with our own people. And then perhaps we don't consider that the shared experiences can be used in a broader conversation to unite for effective change and shared goals.
That's right.
And so that's basically how 904 got started.
That's right. When I first got the invitation to be a part of 904, I was very skeptical because you're right. These conversations were in the house conversations. These are conversations you have, like you said, at your dinner table with folks who look like you, who have a similar shared experience. When I was invited into the space of 904, there were so many different people there. People from all different backgrounds, people from different generations, people who were native to here, some who were not. And what I found was, I feel like I found my tribe. I found people who understood, people who were trying to understand, people who wanted to be better for each other. And I think that was probably the moment for me that shifted my thinking around sort of having these conversations in an insular kind of way. I think you have to still have those, but I think there is so much power in sharing those stories, right, with people who are not from your background, because people generally just don't know what they don't know. And my philosophy is, I don't want you to guess how you should treat me. I need you to understand how to treat me. And so I'm going to share my story with you, give you some background, give you some history and some context, so that as we interact, you understand where I'm coming from. And then I understand where you're coming from. And then we can work to find some sort of solution, some sort of middle ground for where we're trying to go.
I love it. Everything stems from conversation. It's being open to listening, right, without judgment, with the understanding that I probably have no idea what you're talking. That's what my tagline is. I'm no expert. I'm a well-informed smartass. That's basically where it starts from. A well-informed smartass. I do a little backstory research. I find an expert such as yourself, and I bring you on, and I say to you, 904 created race cards, which are literally a deck of cards, or an app on your phone. That help facilitate honest, authentic discussions around race in a way that is accessible to everyone. So I took part in a race cards event, and I didn't know what to expect, right? At first I was nervous. It felt like a game of truth or dare, right? Because like you said, these are conversations that we've had every year at the Passover Seder. We talk about the word slavery and bondage. And I'm not going to lie, there have been conversations at the table where people who are guests ask, what's the difference between your slavery and the slavery in the Black community? And I say, this isn't a competition. We're not here to compare. We've all experienced tragedies, traumas, obstacles. We're here to come together. That's right. So we were about to drop some hard truths in this yoga studio that was warm and welcoming. Thank you, Alejandra at Viva. And, we're experiencing Jew hatred here in this community right now. My kids' friends, the schools in our neighborhoods have had a rise in anti-Semitism, and that triggers me. But believe it or not, in this space, right, we open these cards and there's instructions So I welcome, and I will share the link from Amazon to order them. Are these at the Cummer Museum? Did I see that these are at the Cummer Museum? Because I'm at the Cummer Museum, so if you have a coupon, you can get 20% off. But these were fantastic. It didn't feel angry or defensive. It felt like a learning experience based in growth mindset. So tell me about how and why race cards is effective in breaking barriers and building bridges to affect change during our children's lifetimes.
I really think it's how we set them up. It's how we set up the conversation. The first thing we say is, make sure that you're here with an open mind. But that means that I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to change your experience. I'm not here to challenge even your experience. This is literally a learning space and opportunity for everybody here. So we tell people, listen to hear the experience, listen, and even lean into the discomfort, because there is discomfort sometimes, right? And if it's okay to say, "Ooh, that kind of makes my palms sweaty or my heart beat a little faster." I got to take a pause here and really think about it. But I think it's a space that invites people to be human. Because you mentioned no judgment, and I tell people we all make judgments, right? I don't know that I believe in a no judgment zone.
Right. Except for Planet Fitness, the judgment-free zone.
Right. But what I encourage people to do is, when you have those judgments, to call them out, because there is something there.
Why do I feel that? Right.
Why do I feel that? There is a lot of things that we have learned along our lifetime that no longer serve us, and we have to do some work to unlearn some of those things. And sometimes that creates some friction. And that process is ongoing. It's not a one and done. So that, I think, it's really how we set up the space to kind of relieve people of this is not a conversation about right and wrong. This is not a space where we're going to solve all the world's problems in one conversation. This is a starting place for you if you're on this journey for the first time.
So this is, you have to feel it to heal it. Right? You have to sit with those moments of other people's pain and discomfort. They have that expression, like, I have to get it off my chest. You have to give people the opportunity. I remember somebody asking me in an interview, job interview, so if we hire you and an employee comes to you as their supervisor with complaints, what's the first thing you're going to do? And I said, I'm going to shut my door and let them vent. I'm going to let them rant it out, because 90% of the time, once they get that off their chest, they don't even need me to fix anything. They just wanted to share their experience sucked, and they wanted me to validate their sucky experience. That's sort of what we're doing here.
That's right.
So, okay, I shared my family's horrific history that informed my experience and shaped me. Let's talk about our kids. Do you have kids?
I have 3.
How old?
10, 8, and 3.
Ooh! I have 7 and 10. They're soon to be 8 and 11. And my son's friend in the 5th grade recently had the following experience. A kid tapped him on the shoulder and asked, "Are you Jewish?" He said, "Yes." The kid says, "If you're Jewish, I'm Hitler." When my son shared this story with me, my offspring replies, "I would punch that kid in the face if he said it to me." And I respond with zero hesitation, not unless he throws the first punch and there are 20 witnesses. In the words of Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. As the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and someone who visited concentration camps, I always thought I would be a Tarantino Jew. Did you see that movie, Inglourious Bastards?
Yes.
If not, you okay. So yes. I thought I was going to be Bear Jew, right? Retribution, revenge, pound of flesh. And here I am behaving like a Spielberg Jewish mom, right? Protective, pragmatic, fearful, not unless there's witnesses. Does that feel familiar to you?
Very much so. My son at the time, he was 7, 8, came home and said that someone had called him the N-word. And he wanted to know what he was supposed to do about that. And like you, that resonates so much with me. Like you want to, right?
Hold my hoops.
Like, let me go over here. But realistically, what does that solve? And realistically, does that get that label removed from you? It probably adds
Right.
to that label. And so we had a long discussion about it, and I told him ultimately, one, you let him know he is never to call you that again. And if he does, then you elevate it to whoever you need to elevate it to, and then you tell me, and then you let me take it from there, because I know the channels that I need to navigate to get what I'm looking for. And then the part of me that almost, the little piece of me that died that day, I think, when he told me that someone said that to him, was the fact that it's so early.
Right?
It's so early. And I remember being in elementary school. I went to a predominantly black elementary school. So that wasn't a thing. It wasn't until I got to middle school where I was the minority at the school where that sort of pressure, came. And I was like, that's just so early for him.
Right. I've said in the past that it wasn't until middle school that I realized other grandparents didn't have numbers tattooed on their arms. And so I realized that I had a huge amount of innocence, even knowing what I knew about history. And I'm sure that you had understanding about slavery and civil rights and what that meant for your culture. While I knew that, I still had like an overall safe childhood. And essentially what that meant was that, for example, when I teed this show up, I talked about some of the worst parts of Brooklyn's history. It was, the Crown Heights riots, and it was Bensonhurst, and it was Tawana Brawley. And we as kids only saw what was on the cover of the newspaper, and we probably didn't stick around for any news coverage at 30 minutes at 6 o'clock when our moms were making dinner. Now, that's all our kids are aware of, right? A swastika gets splashed on a building. My kid knows about this, and it never stops being on the news cycle. When something happens in the community to a black person, my kids know that also. So here's the question, right? So the way I spoke with my son, and you spoke with your son, what was the conversation with your husband with the doors closed like? She brought that up. Yeah.
Expletive. Right. It was very much so defensive, and like how do we reinforce the positive attributes of being a black person in America? So, making sure that he understood, number one, no matter what anybody calls you, here is who you are. Right. Here is who we say you are.
We stand in our pride and our faith.
That's right. And so we've talked about how do we make sure that we are reinforcing the fact that he is brilliant. He is a lot of things. He does not have to answer to that. And then also, how do we make sure that he is surrounded by other black young people who are doing amazing things as well? Because we realize that he's in a school that is predominantly white, but there is something about seeing yourself in other people, and his friends are fantastic, and we love his friends. They're great. Their parents are great. But he also needs to see other young black people, young black kids who are unabashedly who they are, excited, friendly, brilliant, athletic, etc. So just making sure that we also surround him with those folks too.
Fantastic. So to use words that I've heard you use before, we're going from feeling helpless and hopeless to actions we can take to create change in our communities and in our children. So we're engaging our children in thoughtful conversations, and let's be very clear. The purpose of something like race cards, and I'd love to take part in this and facilitate. I signed up actually to get trained as a facilitator. Awesome. I don't know how I'll do. How do you think I'll do?
I think you'll be fabulous. Fabulous.
I might need a timer, though, because I'm really excited to engage in these conversations. So we know that our desire to protect our children is first and foremost, and that comes by helping to educate the people that are around them. And so here I am choosing to raise my children here in Jacksonville, right? And I sometimes joke that when my husband got a gig here and he told me, I said, I don't do Vills and I don't do Bergs. But I have to tell you, I have been so impressed by the values and the principles of the people that I have the privilege, like yourself, to spend my time with. Can you share some upcoming events and how we can get to know 90 Forward and the wonderful works that you do there?
Yes. So we always post our events on 90forward.org/events. But the month of March brings a few programs. Obviously, it's International Women's History Day was yesterday.
Yes. Happy International Women's Day to you, Dr. Allen.
Same to you, Sus. Thanks. You. And so tonight we're actually having a panel discussion around the intersection of race and womanhood. So we have a fantastic panel of folks who are going to share, and we're going to end in race cards conversations. And then at the end of the month, on March 30th, we're actually hosting, there are two community champions here, Sale and Angie, and they are from the Muslim community, and we host a Ramadan dinner and race cards conversation together on March 30th. This is our second year doing it. Last year it was incredible. We came together, we learned a little bit about Ramadan, we had race cards conversations, and then we broke the fast together. So it was a really rewarding night, and we're going to do that again.
Well, I am so, so thankful that you took time out of your schedule to come sit and talk with me. And I welcome to have conversations with you any day of the week.
Let's do it. I'm all for it.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Sus.
You can find more information about 90 Forward at 90forward.org. Follow them on social media and sign up to attend some of their events. You can also sign up to be a facilitator, to be a volunteer, and to take part in various events around town. Thanks again.